form. It can be your name, your location, or Shabbat Shalom, anything to show that you are there and that others can feel your presence as we form bonds of virtual community together. And for those of you here in the sanctuary, Shabbat Shalom and Bruchim Habayim. I want to make sure you have a copy of Mishkan Tefillah for Youth because we had a stack right out in front of the sanctuary, and so you can take advantage of that. Today, as I mentioned, is going to be a learner's service. This is, I think, the third learner's service that I'm leading in the cantor's absence during her sabbatical. It's a chance for us to have a service, but it feels a little bit more like a class or a discussion as we discuss some of the ideas behind the prayers. And so in a learner service, I'll be talking a little bit more about the meaning of the prayers, and then we'll pause for a few points to take your questions and to discuss them. I find it's better when I lead a learner's service from down below. I have better eye contact with everybody, and it's easier for me to hear your questions. So I'm going to step to the lower podium, and then we'll begin our service. Okay, well, today's text is Mishkan Tefillah for youth. As you will see, it is intended to... This is very loud. You will see that Mishkan Tefillah for youth is intended to emulate the Mishkan Tefillah format in a few ways. One of them is to have different versions of the same prayer over the course of a 2-page spread. One of them is to mark your progress through a section of the service through the different prayers in the margins of the pages. And one of them is to, even if we're reading an English prayer, to note that we have reached the end of an English translation of a prayer with a one-line Hebrew ending. That ending is called the Chatimah, or the signature or the seal of the prayer, as we conclude that prayer in Hebrew. So there are 3 aspects of this book that I would like to talk about today as we progress through the service. To me, they're really the most innovative parts of the book, and the parts that can open up for us as adult worshipers new insights into the service. So one of those is the translations, right? These are meant to be more child-friendly translations, although I would say that that child-friendly does not necessarily mean pediatric, and so that we can learn using a different, perhaps more accessible vocabulary some of the insights in the prayers. We won't have words like beneficence in a family prayer book, and so one thing to look for is do any of the translations really stand out to you? Do any of the translations offer an insight on the prayers that you wouldn't have gotten from reading or praying from Mishkan Tefillah? Second is going to be the footnotes. So there are footnotes also in Mishkan Tefillah, but the footnotes in Mishkan Tefillah are usually simply biblical citations, or they are references to specific times when some people bow. The footnotes in Mishkan Tefillah for youth are a little bit more open-ended. They're more like, did you know type of footnotes, or try this at home type of footnotes. And so, especially the footnotes might offer you an entree to prayer that you might not have seen otherwise. And then finally, we'll discuss some of the illustrations. So the illustrations are by Mark Podwall, and he's illustrated other things for the Reform movement. He's illustrated one of their Haggadot, and I think his work is frequently found at URJ conventions, things like that. He's not a full-time artist. He's a physician. I think he's a dermatologist, and Jewish art is his side hustle, as it were. But you wouldn't know that by looking at the artwork. He especially for this book, works in images of Hebrew letters. He works in images that relate directly to the themes of the prayers. And so I think, Mishkan Tefillah doesn't have any illustrations. So the idea of having a book where illustrations help tell the story of our relationship with God is going to be very nice. So those are 3 things to look for: translation, footnote, and illustration. And let's begin on page 3 with an opening reading. So one of the things that we, I think, transition out of as we mature as Jews is the idea that inanimate things are personified. So many of us remember being told that, for example, that we cover the challah with a challah cover at the Shabbat table because the challah would be embarrassed at learning that it was blessed last. Okay, that is one of the ways we teach children that that there is a challah cover, and B, that the challah gets the last blessing. But we don't really believe the challah. At least I don't think we really believe that the challah has feelings. You'll tell me later. But with that in mind, so here we have a personification not of an object like a loaf of challah, but we have a personification of Shabbat itself. Once Shabbat came to God to complain. Every day of the week has a partner. Sunday goes with Monday, Tuesday goes with Wednesday, and Thursday goes with Friday. Only I don't have a partner. God replied, the people of Israel will be your partner. And so in that way, we learned that we have a special relationship with Shabbat more than any of the other days of the week. And we enter into our service on page 14 with an opening song. So one of the things that you'll notice in Mishkan Tefillah for Youth is that morning prayers and evening prayers are interspersed. There is no separate section for Shabbat evening and Shabbat morning. But you know that you've hit the right prayer for your time of day based on the celestial object in the corner of the page. So it's a morning service, and I think without exception today, we will be offering prayers that have the sun in the outer corner of the page, including on page 14. Please join me in Matovu. Matovu, Ohalecha Yaakov, Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. Matovu, Ohalecha Yaakov, Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. Va'ani berov chastecha avo beitecha eshtachaveh el heichal kodshecha be'yiratecha matovu ohalecha Yaakov ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael matovu ohalecha Yaakov ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. We turn now to the blessings, the morning blessings, the Birkot HaShachar, which begin on page 15. Please read with me. My God, I thank you for my life, body, and soul. Help me realize that I am something new, someone who never existed before, someone original and unique in the world. For if there had ever been someone like me, there would have been no need for me to exist. Baruch atah Adonai, Rofeh chol basar, umafli la'asot. So having thanked God for the miracle of the body, we turn to page 16, and we read a blessing in Hebrew for the thanks God for the miracle of the soul. There are certain pages in Mishkan Tefillah for Youth where there is no English translation, and this is one of them. So there's the Hebrew, there's the transliteration, so you can articulate the Hebrew, and there is an illustration, and so you know, I believe all the illustrations in Mishkan Tefillah for Youth, if they have a Hebrew letter like this one, it is the first Hebrew letter on the page. So a minute ago we saw a mem, the mem was for Matovu, and then a mezuzah next to that. Now we see an aleph. The aleph is for Elohai Neshama. And if you want to know the theme of the prayer and what it means, there is a little clue, but you would have to look on page 17 in the margin to see which line is bolded, and it says, "The soul you have breathed into me." That is the prayer. That is the theme of this prayer that we're about to say in Hebrew. Please join with me. Elohai Neshama shenatata bi Tehorahi, Baruch atah Adonai, asher biado nefesh kol chai, veruach kol basar ish. Next is the Nisim B'chol Yom, the blessings for our daily miracles, and it begins with the first 6 letters. Each line begins that way, and I think that we can do this one responsibly, beginning with the second line of the English. Let's see how that goes. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech ha'olam. We praise you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of all time and space. We call you Pokeach Ivrim, the opener of blind eyes. We call you Malbish Arumim, the dresser of those without clothing. Help us to put on the garments of health and life. We call you Matir Asurim, the freer of captives. Help us to break free of the bonds that keep us locked within ourselves. We call you Zokef Kifufim, the straightener of bent backs. Help us to find the power to stand upright and proud. We call you Hamechin Mitzadeh Gaver, the steadiness in our steps. Help us to understand our journey ever more clearly. We call you Hanotein Liya'if Koach, the source of strength for the weary. Help us to be strong and to be a source of strength for those we love. We turn now to page 18, where we find the blessing for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And now, having offered the blessing for the study of Torah, we look to page 19, and we read the Hebrew frame, first line and last line of Hebrew, as well as the English translation in the middle. Elu devarim she'ein lahem shi'ur. These are things that are limitless, of which a person enjoys the fruit of the world, while the principle remains in the world to come. They are honoring fathers and mothers, engaging in deeds of compassion, arriving early for study morning and evening, dealing graciously with guests, visiting the sick, providing for the wedding couple, accompanying the dead for burial, being devoted in prayer, and making peace among people. But the study of Torah encompasses them all. Okay. The Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. So let's pause here for a moment. We've had a few creative translations already. Translation for Thanking God for the Body, the translation for the Nisim B'Chol Yom, and then this translation for Elu Devarim. So I wanted to see if any of those translations stood out for you, if there are any words or phrases which you thought were better perhaps than their matching counterparts in Mishkan Tefillah, or anything that struck you about the English so far in the service. Yes, Rachel?
I like the Nisim B'Chol Yom because, I mean, we say it, we sing it, and unless you're reading along with the English translation, you don't really know what it means. But this spells it out pretty clearly for, if you really want to know what you just said.
Okay, so Rachel's basically saying, it's a nice opportunity to read something in translation that we normally do only in Hebrew, right? And so that's...
And with an explanation.
The explanation being the text, or the explanation being something in the footnotes? No, there wasn't a footnote on that page.
Just
we're on
the
page 17 talking about
explanation,
the text.
We call you Malbisha Rumim, the dresser of those without clothing. I didn't know that.
Okay.
And then an explanation, so why are we saying, help us put on the garments of health and life? That's the explanation of what it means.
Great. So it is a reference that this is a nice translation in the sense that it's translation and explanation, but it's also an argument that we perhaps lose something when in our customs at Temple Emeth we do the same prayers week after week only in Hebrew and never pause to read them out loud in English, because there is a similar translation in Mishkan Tefillah, but we never do it. I like, and I think I can speak for the cantor, we like the authenticity and the rhythm of the Hebrew, and so we always do that one in Hebrew, except for today. Any other questions or comments about the English so far, the translation of these prayers? Including that opening reading about Shabbat, being lonely. Yes, Mary?
I like what we just read on page 19. So clear and beautifully presented, and it's terrific.
Okay. Yes, Gail?
And along with what Marion said, and Mike pointed out, in Mishkan Tefillah it says honoring one's father and mother.
Yes.
And this is more inclusive, honoring fathers and mothers. So if you don't have a mother or a father, you still feel like it's your prayer.
Right, because when it's done, it's becoming a communal responsibility rather than an individual responsibility. And even if you don't have a father or a mother, certainly you have friends and acquaintances who do, and this means honoring their parents as well. Great, thank you. Okay, we're going to continue now on page 20. This would be the separation of segments of the service anyway, moving from Birkot HaShachar, Pesukei Zimra, which is the opening sections of the service, to now the Shachri, which is the main morning part of the service. So we continue with the Chatzi Kaddish on page 20. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba Be'alma divrach Yerutei Be'amlich Malchutei B'chayechon Uvyom Echon V'chayei Dechol Beit Yisrael Ba'agala Ubizman Kari V'imeru Amen Yehei Shmei Rabba Mivorach Le'olam Ulom Me'almaya Yitbarach V'ishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitromam V'yitnaseh V'yithadar V'yitalev V'yithalal Shemei D'Kudesha Berichu Le'lami Kol Berchata V'shirata Tushbechata V'nechemata Da'amiran Be'alma V'yimeru Amen. Please rise if you are able for the Baruch Hu on page 22. And as we prepare for Baruch Hu, this is a good example. Our next break in the service will be to discuss the footnotes. And this is a good example of how there's at least three categories of footnotes. There's the get moving, about the physical way that we use our space, the highlight on the Hebrew, and questions to think about, called, very simply, think about it. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. We turn to page 26 as we continue now with Yotzer Or. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Yotzer Or Uvorei Choshech Oseh Shalom Uvorei Et HaKol Hameir La'aretz V'ladarim Aleha B'rachamim Uvtuvo Mechadesh B'chol Yom Tamid Ma'aseh V'reishit Ma Rabu Ma'asecha Adonai Kulam B'chochma Asita Mal'ah Ha'aretz Kinyanecha Titbarach Adonai Eloheinu Al Shevach Ma'aseh Yadecha Ve'al Me'orei Or Sha'asita Yefa'arucha Selah Or Chadash Al Tzion Ta'ir V'niskei Chulanu Mehera Le'oro Baruch Atah Adonai Yotzer HaMe'orot. We turn now to page 31. We read together, a great big love surrounds us, bigger than the biggest mountain, longer than the longest time. God is like a great big love around us and in us, teaching Torah to our mothers and fathers and us. When we listen and learn, when we hear and understand, we feel God around us and in us, teaching us to love. We turn to page 33 for the Chatima. Baruch Atah Adonai Habocher Be'amo Yisrael Be'ahava. And we turn the page again as we join together in the Shema. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto join now in Ve'ahavta on page 36. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'veitecha uvlechtecha v'derech uvshochbecha uvkumecha ukshartam le'od al yadecha v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha leman tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'tem kiddoshim le'Elohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim lihiot lachem le'Elohim ani Adonai Elohechem. We turn now to page 41. If you come to family services every once in a while, you'll know that there is no English reading for in the evening part with the little crescent moons to introduce Mi Chamocha, and I have to make something up at every service that I try to connect whatever season we're in or whatever Torah portion we're about to read to Mi Chamocha, because there's only a big letter mem with 12 little musical notes to guide me. But here on the morning part of the Siddur that introduces Mi Chamocha, we do have an introductory reading, and given that we are entering into the book of Exodus this week, it is a very appropriate reading. So the reading is on page 41, and then when we're done, we'll just look to the facing page to page 40 to join together in Mi Chamocha. Please read with me. Long ago we were slaves in Egypt. After 10 terrible plagues, Pharaoh finally told Moses that we could be free. We could be free to celebrate Shabbat. We could be free to pray to God. We could be free to be Jewish. But just as we got to sea, Pharaoh changed his mind again. His chariots and soldiers were coming to take us back to Egypt, back to slavery. Just then the sea parted and we safely crossed to the other side. We couldn't believe it. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai. We sang, who is like you, Adonai? Today there are people who are not free. We promise that with your help, we will work hard to make sure that everyone is set free. Then all the world will sing with joy. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai. Mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh. No ratehilot o seifele. No ratehilot o seifele. Shira chadasha shibechu geulim. Leshimecha al sefat hayam. Yachad kulam hodu v'himlichu ve'ameru Adonai yimloch, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. Tzur Yisrael kuma be'ezrat Yisrael ufidei chinumecha Yehuda ve'Yisrael. Go aleinu Adonai Tsebaot Shemo Kedosh Yisrael Baruch Atah Adonai Ga'al Yisrael. We turn to page 45. Oh, I hit a loophole because there is no sun or moon on page 45. So this is a reading inspired by Vishamru. We would sing Vishamru at this point in the service only on Shabbat evening, not on Shabbat morning, but we're not going to sing Mishama, we're going to read a reading inspired by it. And, it's also your chance, because I'm about to ask you about the footnotes, it's your chance to slide 2 footnotes in there at the bottom of page 44, as together we read. When woman and man were made, God left one good thing for last, Shabbat, the day to give thanks for the world and its wonders. Now the 7th day has come. Now Shabbat begins to bring us rest, to bring us joy, to bring us song, to bring us peace. On this day we remember the goodness of earth and air, water and sun, and all that grows. On this day we remember the many gifts of God. Let us remember and give thanks. Okay, so we're going to pause for a moment now and see if you were able to glance at the footnotes along the way. I mean, in honesty, if you're focused on the prayers, maybe you didn't look at the footnotes. Sometimes the footnotes are only for when you're bored. But we have a couple of comments. Yes,
No, I particularly looked at the footnote on page 22 about the Baruch Hu.
Okay.
Because it gives instructions that it's a call and response, that the congregation doesn't sing out until it's a response. That
Yes.
You're supposed to bow, not the first time,
But
not
this-
sing the first time,
Right.
but it's supposed to be the second
Yes,
time.
so in essence, a figurative translation would be, according to the footnote, that the leader, that me, says, "Are you ready to pray?" And we respond, that would be you, "Yes, let's pray." And that the bowing also corresponds with the responding.
Yes.
Excellent. Yes, Marcia?
Jump back to the previous prayer. Can you translate Micha Mocha? What does it mean?
Can I translate Mi Chamocha? Sure. So,
Just that expression, not the whole thing,
just the 2-word phrase Mi Chamocha is "who is like you."
And then how come it's spelled differently both in Hebrew and English between line 1 and line 2?
Yeah. So that comes straight from the Torah. Of course, the Torah doesn't have vowels, but it comes straight from the oldest manuscripts of the Torah that have vowels. Have the vowels different. I mean, you could say that's just how it is in the oldest manuscripts. That is not a satisfying answer for everyone. So there are some who say that the Israelites wanted to prove their faith to God, and so even before the sea split, they jumped in, knowing that God would redeem them, and they jumped in the sea. Obviously, they were slaves; they did not know how to swim, and they started singing "Mi Chamocha Ba'elim Adonai." But by the time they got to the second line, the water had entered their mouths. They did not know how to swim, and so by the time they got to the second line, the water was in their mouths, and all they could get out was "Mi Chamocha Nedar B'Kodesh." So that's a stretch. Of course, it's a midrash. Midrash is Hebrew for stretch.
Got it.
Yes, Lai.
Does the Torah have candlelating marks?
No, not the scroll itself. All those must be learned from a book and memorized before you walk up to the scroll. Okay, any other comments about footnotes? Yes, Rachel.
A number of years ago, I went to a workshop at a Shabbaton that was about Jewish choreography. So talking about when you rise and when you bow and all of that. And I found it really interesting because for the Baruch Hu, you're supposed to go down on the Baruch Hu, but be standing up again on the Adonai.
Yes.
And before that, I thought to myself, it's better for God to bow longer. But no, and it says it here on page 22 that you go down on the Baruch Hu and you rise up on the Adonai.
Yes. So, right, we don't, not that everybody follows that, but that is sort of the, let's call it normative choreography. Okay, so we're going to continue on page 40, let's see, page 47 as we get ready for the tefillah. 47. And I guess I'll just note that, because it won't really affect what we do today, but Mishkan Tefillah, I said that there wasn't a Shabbat evening and a Shabbat morning, separate sections, but there is actually a separate Shabbat section and a separate weekday section. The idea being that Shabbat The Shabbat part of the prayer book is for family services, like the first Friday of the month here at Temple Emeth, and for occasions such as this, public services where you're not expected to know Hebrew to participate in the service. And so the Shabbat section is transliterated. The weekday section is presumably for religious school services where the children have either learned or in the process of learning the Hebrew letters and the Hebrew words. And to have transliteration in front of them at a religious school service would serve to undermine the overall educational goals of the Hebrew program. And so in the weekday part of the Siddur, there is no transliteration, there's only translation. And so you would have, had we been in that part of the book, you would have seen that Mi Chamocha means who is like you. But in this case, it was a very valid question. And so the transliteration is here for you. Please take advantage of it if you need it. But we won't find any direct translations. We'll only find these interpretive translations on the left side of the page. Okay, we're on page 47 now. I cannot see the wind at all or hold it in my hand, and yet I know there is a wind because it swirls the sand. I know there is a wondrous wind because I glimpse its power whenever it bends low a tree or sways the smallest flower. And God is very much like this, invisible as air. I cannot touch or see God, yet I know that God is there, because I glimpse God's wondrous works and goodness everywhere. Please rise if you are able for the tefillah, which begins on page 48. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avoteinu v'Imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor B'Hanorah El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim Bekonei Hakol V'zocher Chastei Avot V'imahot Umei Figula Livnei V'neihem Le'man Shemo Be'ahava Melech Ozer Moshiach U'Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham Ve'ezrat Sarah Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mechayeh HaKol Atah Rab Lehoshia Mashiv HaRuach U'Morid HaGashem Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed Mechayeh HaKol Berachamim Rabim Somech Noflim Verofech Olim Humatir Asurim Umekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar Michamocha Baal Givurot Umidom Elach Melech Meimit Umechayeh Umatzmiach Yeshua V'ne'eman atah lahachayot hakol Baruch atah Adonai Mechayeh hakol. We turn now to page 55 for an interpretation of the Kiddusha. God, everywhere we turn, we feel your power and your holiness. We feel you with us when we hear a newborn cry, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. We feel you with us when we touch a soft flower, holy, holy, holy. We feel you with us when we see a rainbow after a storm, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. We feel you with us when we are loving and loved, holy, holy, holy. We feel you with us when we do a mitzvah, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. We praise you, eternal God. Everywhere we turn, you are there. Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh. Please be seated. We turn to page 61. Yes?
One of the things that always bothers me when I see this book, and it's beautiful, and the poetry in the places are beautiful. And that's a beautiful poem from
the difference between translation and interpretation, right? So the translation is all about God's holiness, right? And the prayer is really inspired by the prophet Isaiah being in God's throne room with the angels flying back and forth and seeing God's throne and seeing the hem of God's royal garment. And that's not, I think, the image that they want to portray in an interpretation. So
Just that they think that it's an ecstatic vision like that is too much to give to a little kid, or?
probably, I mean, I'm speculating. I was not invited to be part of the editorial process, but yes, in other words, the prophet was having visions, and so the prophet's sense of what makes God holy had to do with visions, right? Whereas what a 10 or 11-year-old child walking into a Reformed synagogue conceives of as holy is going to be different. It's going to be about family and friends and the world around them.
Yeah, but children are very good at imagining things.
Yes, yeah, but look, clearly some of it is our discomfort in terms of teaching children, what's the right word? I guess the metaphysical aspects of theology, right? Because the more you talk about angels, the more questions they're going to have about angels, and yet angels are not fundamental to Reformed Jewish theology. It's the angels who say, Kadosh, 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 in the original Isaiah text, but that's not to say that we, I'll speak on behalf of Reformed rabbis, it's not to say that we want to spend our time speaking to children about God, answering questions about angels, necessarily.
Poetry is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's nice poetry.
But it's just off topic, is what you're saying.
It just bothers me that it's like a misrepresentation to put it as an interpretation of Shabbat.
Okay.
That bothers me.
Yes, Rachel.
Further, as you said before, there's no morning or evening on this, but normally when we have our service, our family service, you have us turn to page 98 for the tefillah.
Yes.
And although we don't do Nikadesh and Shimcha on the Kedusha at night, if you look at page 104,
Okay.
over here, there is a translation of it. It's not angels and things like that.
Correct.
But it does actually explain what the Kedusha is, what it means.
Yes, so that is one of the sacrifices that the editors of the book have asked us to make, is that when we're in the Shabbat section, as we are right now, you don't get any direct translations. You get Hebrew, you get transliteration, you get interpretive translations. So, like Ida and Jean, you might say they've gone a little too far in interpreting, but that is the format of our Shabbat side of the book. Okay, well clearly we've broken into the discussion part. Yes, Michael.
If I can go back to the tefillah on page 46.
Yes.
In the commentary, I was a little surprised to see a prayer talking where we're praying to God, and yet they're trying to make some kind of an analogy to a king and a queen, which is somehow, in the real world, the king and the queen shouldn't have any relationship to a prayer where you're praying to God.
Okay. So we're on you actually are following the directions and asking a question about the footnotes. Yes. So let's hold that for a second, because I wanted to read the prayer for peace and then specifically open it up to questions and comments about the footnotes. So yes, Marcia, and then we'll do the prayer for peace.
Okay. So historically, who or when decided the structure of this service? I mean, when did this all come about?
A long time ago.
That you do this, I know that you do this prayer, but then you do that prayer, and the whole structure.
Okay, so the short answer is that the structure that we know to be the service was basically an invention of the Talmudic rabbis. That they had to develop something to take the place of sacrificial worship, and they had plenty of biblical proof texts to show this is the theme to say now, and this is the theme to say here. But and of course, with traveling all over the globe, and with the advent of writing scrolls and publishing books. Of course, it evolved over time, but it is a very old format.
That great metaphor you used for movie theater. You told me 17 years ago.
I don't remember from 17 years ago. You can remind me later. Okay, so let's read the prayer for peace, and then let's open it up to anything you learned from the footnotes. So we're back onto my script here, page 61.
Sorry.
Page 61, please read with me in the middle of the page. What does peace look like? It looks like Jacob and Esau hugging after many years apart. It looks like two countries signing a peace treaty. It looks like Rebekah comforting Isaac after the death of his mother Sarah. What does peace sound like? It sounds like kind words on a bad day. It sounds like a sincere apology and a promise to try harder. It sounds like people who are different trying to understand each other. What does peace feel like? It feels like Joseph's tears when he is reunited with his brothers. It feels like people going outside without being afraid. It feels like everything is going to be okay. Baruch atah Adonai hamavarech et amo Yisrael. Ba'shalom. Okay, so now is the point where I wanted to ask you about footnotes. Michael had a comment about a footnote, so let's start with you, Michael. Page 46, right, was the footnote? Okay, so at the fourth of the four footnotes on page 46 says, reciting the tefillah is like standing before a king or queen. As we enter the throne room, it is customary to take a few small steps back, then 3 small steps forward. Okay, what do you want to say about that?
It just seemed to me somehow wrong to, on the one hand, be talking about praying to God, and then on the other hand, talking about, I'm not sure what the purpose of talking about it.
Okay, so
The 3 steps.
so really this is meant to be an explanation. Remember, get moving is about the physical way that we fill our space, so or choreography, right? So you will see people taking 3 steps at that point in the service. And so this is an explanation for the 3 steps. There is plenty of imagery of God as a king, right? The word melech, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. So we're invoking, at least in some way, God in the image of a king with almost every blessing. I share your, I don't know this is exactly what you're saying, but I share your difficulty with it on 2 levels. Number 1 is, we're Americans, and we don't have a king or a queen. And, our favorite royal now is the one who's left the royal family and who's made the book lecture circuit this past week. And so I don't think that we as Americans can fully appreciate what it is to be in the presence of a king or a queen because we don't have one. I mean, we are citizens. Technically, across the pond, they are not citizens, they are subjects, right? And so there's a certain disconnect of that metaphor. And secondly is that we have been trying now for at least 10 years and maybe much longer to a certain extent, to remove this authoritarian model of God, which is exemplified with the king and queen imagery, right? Look at what we've done in Mishkan HaNefesh to Avinu Malkeinu. We don't even translate Avinu, we still say it, but we don't translate it anymore. The old High Holiday Prayer book said Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. Now this one just says Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu. And so we are trying to distance ourselves from this hierarchical authoritarian relationship with God, and a footnote like this, as much as it explains the 3 steps, kind of brings us backward in that effort. Okay, other comments on footnotes? Okay, so we are going to continue. Let's see.
Question here.
Footnotes.
Question.
I see his hand, but I want to double check that I didn't make a mistake in my notes. Okay. Yes, sorry.
Marsha asked about the structure,
Yes.
and I might have this wrong, but I've talked to some Christians who came into a Jewish service that it's so structured. apparently, I don't know that much about the Christian services, but apparently we're much more structured.
Well, yes, so Christianity is a broad spectrum, so I don't want to, A, I know nothing about it, other than it's a broad spectrum, and B, you know, we still manipulate our own structure, with the best example being, you know, it says, you shall speak of them when you lie down and when you rise up, right? That's from the Be'ahavta. So that whole part of the service is done only in the morning and the evening and not in the afternoon, as opposed to Mincha, which is the part that's done 3 times a day. The Mincha has the Tefillah, which is done 3 times a day, but Shmo V'Rechoteha is another part which is done only twice a day. So the structure of the service is not exactly our topic today, but suffice to say, you know, it is. You have to have some acknowledgement of structure in every prayer book, in every every Jewish prayer book. Otherwise, you don't have a Siddur. And the word Siddur itself comes from the word for order. And so, so implicit in the fact that you call it a Siddur is an acknowledgement that you are embracing the structure to a certain extent. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to find anything on any page. Yes, Gail?
There's a footnote on page 46, the second one, and it says, think about it. How is praying with open lips different than praying with closed lips?
Yes. Okay, so we've left something out, going back to what Marcia was asking about. There's no translation on this page, right? Adonai Sefatai Tiftach. Oh God, open my lips that my mouth may praise your name, right? May declare your praise. And so I don't think anywhere on this 2-page spread it talks about, in English, about opening lips except for the footnote, okay? So this is the type of thing that kids are supposed to think about, right? Do they pray in their minds? Do they make wishes to God? Do they talk to God on any level just by thinking about it? And then when they come into the sanctuary, we ask them to say the prayers out loud and open and move their lips. And is there a difference between the two? Because I think every kid does both at some point in their week or some point in their lives. Let's take a minute and think about when you do one and when you do the other.
It's more meaningful when you do something physical, especially for children. Children don't learn the way adults learn just by listening. They have to physical.
Yes, it's more meaningful, but it's also more public. To open your lips and say something is more public than to just think about it in your heart, and so then it is subject to potentially to the judgment of others. That could make it more difficult, right? Okay, let us continue with the Torah service, and the Torah service is on page 120, and so I'm going to invite our honorees, Mary Wolf and Nancy Mednick, up to the bima with me as we take the Torah from the Ark. Please rise if you are able. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Gadol Adonai Iti, U'neromeh Shemo Yachdav, Al Shlosha Devarim, Al Shlosha Devarim, Al shlosha divarim, al shlosha divarim, haolam, haolam, amen. Please be seated. This week's Torah portion is Parshat Shemot. It is the first Torah portion in the book of Exodus. And the most inspiring part of Parshat Shemot to me is reading about the midwives, Shifra and Puah. So I gave a Devar Torah about them last night, which now I can say, if you didn't hear last night, you can go back into the archive and you can play it for yourself in the live stream archive. But the summary of it is that they are exemplars, or the first practitioners of civil disobedience. They don't do it the way that Martin Luther King speaks about it in his day, and yet whatever it is they do, understanding Pharaoh's Pharaoh's command to be unjust and the law of God to be just, earns them a reward from God, batim, which gets usually translated as households. The commentators really use that as an opportunity to interpret because it doesn't make sense. So they have lots of possibilities of what it could mean. And the import is that on their watch, though they were commanded to kill the boys live. And I believe that their example then influences the Pharaoh's daughter when she sees Moses floating in the Nile. She, like the midwives, does not follow the command to kill him. She rescues him and raises him, and in doing so changes the course of history. You can follow along as I read from the Torah. Here in the sanctuary, in the Torah commentaries, Exodus chapter 1, verse 15 is found on page 383. Page 383, and if you have a revised Torah commentary at home, then Exodus chapter 1, verse 15 in your book is found on page 347. And for the honor of the Aliyah, we call upon Marian Wolf. Baruch Adonai Haborach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Haborach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam, Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim, V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Amen. Vayomer Melech Mitzrayim L'mayaladot Ha'ivriot, Asher Shem Ha'achat Shifra, V'Shem Ha'shenit Puah. Vayomer B'yaldechen Et Ha'ivriot Uriten, Al Ha'ovnaim, Im Ben Hu V'amiten Oto, V'im Bat Hi V'chaya, V'tirena Ha'meyaladot Et Ha'elohim, V'lo Asu Ka'asher Diber Aleihen Melech Mitzrayim, V'tichiena Et Ha'yeladim, V'yikra Melech Mitzrayim L'mayaladot, V'yomer lahen Madua Asiten Hadavar Hazeh, V'tichiena Et Ha'yeladim, V'tomarna Ha'meyaladot El Paro, Ki lo Chanashim Ha'mitzriot Ha'ivriot, Ki chayot hena, B'terem tavo aleihen, Ha'meyaledet v'yaladu, V'yetev Elohim l'meyaladot, V'yerev ha'am, V'ya'atzmeu me'od, V'yehi, Ki yiru ha'meyaladot et ha'elohim, V'ya'as lahem batim, V'yitzav paro, Lechol amo lemor, Kol haben hayilod hayaora tashlichuhu v'chol haba tichiyun.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam, Asher natan lanu Torat Emet, V'chayei Olam natav Tocheinu.
Amen. This time our thoughts turn to those in need of healing as we prepare to offer a Mishabera for healing, which is found in Mishkan Tefillah for Youth on page 125. If you are thinking of someone in need of healing and you're watching us on live stream, I invite you to share the name of your loved one in the chat or comment section of the live stream platform. And here in the sanctuary, I invite you to share the name of your loved one out loud or in your comment.
Between Lerman and Alexandra Healy.
James Locke.
Debbie Kahn, Michael Kelly, Richard Kelly, Mike Dillon, and Michelle.
The names of our temple members in need of healing and their loved ones will be shown on the screen. Please join with me as together we sing the Mishabera. Mishaberach Avotenu Mikor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishaberach Imotenu Mikor HaBracha Lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shalema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. We continue now with the lifting and dressing of the Torah. Please rise if you are able for Hagba and Galila. Okay, so actually we're going to take that in the mirror. You'll do the Vizot HaTorah Asher Sam Moshe Lifnei Bnei Yisrael Ani Adonai B'yad Moshe Yalalai lai 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 Yalalai lai 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 Yalalai lai 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 lai. You have to put that next to you. So really the only thing not in Mishkan Tefillah for youth that we're doing today is the Haftarah blessings. So, I mean, Nancy's going to do them for us. You don't really need to open to page 372 in Mishkan Tefillah, do you? I'll tell you the page in the Torah commentary for the Haftarah text. So the Haftarah today comes from Isaiah, and Isaiah talks about this idea of, being in the land of Egypt, leaving the land of Egypt, the shofar as a symbol of freedom being sounded, and so you get the sense of destiny in terms of Isaiah knows the end of the story. he knows the Israelites will be redeemed, and he sort of tells the story from his own prophetic point of view. So you can follow along from the beginning of the Haftarah portion. That begins at Isaiah chapter 27, verse 6. Here in the sanctuary in the Torah commentary on page 692. And if you are watching on live stream, you can watch you can find the same passage in the revised Torah commentary on page 375. And Nancy Mednick is going to offer the Haftarah for us. So Nancy, you're set right here with blessing and Haftarah. Blessing. But let me bring this microphone over first.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nvi'im tovim v'ratza v'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah uv'Moshe ado uv'Yisrael amo uv'nvi'ei ha'emet v'tzedek. In days to come, Jacob shall strike root, Israel shall sprout and blossom, and the face of the world shall be covered with fruit. Was he beaten as his bearer has been? Did he suffer such slaughter as his slayers? Assailing them with fury unchained, his pitiless blast bore them off on a day of gale. Assuredly, by this alone shall Jacob's sin be purged away. This is the only price for removing his guilt, that he make all the altar stones like shattered blocks of chalk, with no sacred post left standing, nor any incense altar. Thus fortified cities lie desolate, homesteads deserted, forsaken like a wilderness. Their calves graze, there they lie down and consume its boughs. When its crown is withered, they break. Women come and make fires with them, for they are a people without understanding. That is why their Maker will show them no mercy. Their Creator will deny them grace. And in that day the Lord will beat out the peoples like grain, from the channel of the Euphrates to the Wadi of Egypt. And you shall be picked up one by one, O children of Israel. And in that day a great ram's horn shall be sounded, and the strayed who are in the land of Assyria and the expelled who are in the land of Egypt shall come and worship the Lord on the holy mount in Jerusalem. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, rock of all creation, righteous one of all generations, the faithful God, whose word is deed, whose every command is just and true, for the Torah, for the privilege of worship, for the prophets, and for this Shabbat that you, Adonai, our God, have given us, for holiness and rest, for honor and glory. We thank and bless you. May your name be blessed forever by every living being. Praise to you, Adonai, for the Sabbath and its holiness. Amen. Amen.
We prepare to return the Torah to the Ark. Please turn in Mishkan Tefillah for Youth to page 126. Please rise if you are able as we open the Ark. Eitz Chaim hi lama chazikim ba v'tom cheha meushar dera I said I would stand next. Honorees to send. Oh, I said I would stand here. Okay, so this is more cues and camera angles, but sure, we can call it choreography. Okay, so the microphone is still pointed in your direction because I would love to hear specifically about your thoughts on the illustrations by Mark Pogwall in Mishkan Tefillah for Youth. But we don't have to limit our discussion just to the illustrations. If you have other comments on the book, the goal was that you would learn something new or different about the act of prayer and perhaps your own relationship with God by using a different seed word today. So if you'd like to comment on that broader question, you may as well. Let's start with anything about the illustrations. Did you have a favorite illustration? Yes, Debbie.
I don't have a favorite, but I think they are just wonderful, and that children will be taken with them. You know, they're not so formal. They're as if a child could have perhaps drawn these with, paint outside the lines and stuff like that. So I just think they're great. They're great the way they put it all together, with all the letters of the Hebrew.
Great, thank you. Other comments about the illustrations? Yes, I have Jean.
I think the illustrations add a lot for very young children. I struggle with this book when the kids get to be past about 9 years, because I really feel strongly that at that age you should almost be normalizing looking at a regular sitter. And so I really dislike this book for that, 9 to 14 kind of age range. It bothers me because it infantilizes something that and tells them that they are not able to parse a regular sitter and that they need the pictures and the distraction. And I don't think they do at that age.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Nancy.
I like the way he turns the Hebrew letters into works of art by themselves. I think it's very beautiful.
So as an example, I don't know if you had this in mind, but when you said this, it made me think of just as we were putting the Torah away on page 127. So the idea is that the Torah is a tree of life, and so the letter Taf, representing Torah, is green, and then there is a tree growing out of the Torah scroll, right? And what kind of tree is it? It is a pomegranate tree, because pomegranates represent Torah, first of all, because of their seeds. The idea is that it is a very fruitful tree, but also the names of the crowns. So when you have we don't have this in Temple Emeth, when you have a single crown that goes on both sides of the Torah, it's called something else. But when you have the two littler crowns, which is what we have, and you put them on the top, those are called rimonim, those are called pomegranates. And so there is a play on words with the pieces of silver themselves that he has then drawn on to have pomegranates growing out of the top of the Torah.
What's the single one?
The single one is a keter, it's a crown.
Oh, keter.
I think it's great.
Great. Others on the illustrations?
I think they're beautiful. And anything that can help. I mean, I've got a 10-year-old in my life, and let me tell you, illustrations are good. It helps. It's like, adding a little bit of sweetness to whatever, to the food, yeah.
So I did ask the publisher about the Shema. Not so much the Shema, right? So it's the letter Shin for Shema, and then each arm of the letter Shin is a mezuzah. But of course, mezuzah starts with Mem. But on each mezuzah is a little letter Shin, which stands for Shaddai. But I asked her, why are there no page numbers? That's my concern when I'm leading a service. And she said, well, once you're going edge to edge with color, it's basically an artistic convention or an artistic assumption that you won't put a page number on a page that has a full color background. And so I have to say, we went straight from the page before, so it was easy for us to just turn the page. In a family service, I have to say, it's the page after page 33 or something to that effect to make sure that they're on the right page for the Shema. Yes?
The mezuzah on the left, it doesn't have a shin.
It's got one in it.
Am I missing it?
Have a shin.
On the mezuzah on the left.
Right. Yeah, and if you squint this little thing at the top is a shin, but yes, you are right. There's no clearly defined shin on that one. We can write him a letter, interrupt his dermatology practice to ask him why the one on the left does not have a shin.
But inside all mezuzahs with the chag, there is a shin.
Yes, right, because remember, mezuzah is only a case. The mezuzah has no holiness by itself. The holiness is only that it holds the parchment, and the way that a parchment is done is that it has the ve'ahavta, and you roll it up, and so then on the outside, the way it's designed is that then as you roll it up, on the outside it says Shaddai on it. So you know that if it has the right scroll inside, there's always a shin. Okay, so we can move it a little bit more generally. If you have any comments about the book in general and the idea of using the book here as a group of adults, whether it offers any insights for you. Yes, Arthur.
Well, I always love, I love this book. It's so attractive in many ways. Page 61, I love both of those passages. I couldn't, as a mediator, I couldn't really use the second passage because it's too specific to the Jewish tradition.
Mm-hmm.
But boy, something like that really could motivate people in just people who want to, sort of come to some kind of peaceful relationship, but it has some beautiful ideas.
Thank you.
And intellectually, the top thing, I don't have all the answers. I mean, for that age group, well, it's for 80-year-olds too.
Right. Well, that was kind of the presumption of today's service, is that there's something for all ages in this book if we're looking for it. Right. So we didn't read it out loud. So the passage that Arthur just referred to is the one at the top of page 61. Dear God, save us from thinking that we have all the answers. Save us from talking when we should be listening. Save us from clenched fists and closed minds. Open our hearts to the way of peace. Amen. And so Arthur has a deep background in mediation, and maybe this could be the prayer. This is the prayer for the mediator or the prayer for the parties to the mediation. You don't have to answer that.
Well, sometimes they go after you, So
okay.
Don't attack the mediator. He's not the problem.
Yes, Marianne.
I think that the best children's books also appeal to adults because when they are published, the publishers know that parents read to their kids, and if they don't have appeal for adults, the parents aren't going to be reading the same thing hundreds of times. And I think it holds for this too, that it appeals to us too.
Thank you. Okay, well, we're going to continue now with the Elenu. I'm going to step up to my Elenu podium, and we will continue. The Elenu is found in Mishkan Tefillah for Youth on page 130. Please rise if you are able for the Elenu. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol l'tekru l'aleon ser breshit shelo asanu kegoye ha'aratzot velo samanu kemishpechot ha'adama shelo sam chelkenu kahem bigor aleinu kechol hamonam va'anachnu kor'im umishtachavim umodim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. Please be seated. We read together at the top of page 131. Dear God, may we, the children of the world, not repeat the mistakes of past generations. Free us from the traps of old arguments and ancient battles. May we, the children of the world, discover a new way of living, where the riches of some are not at the expense of others. May we, the children of the world, use our energy and optimism to overcome the barriers and fences of the past. May we, the children of the world, have a new vision for this planet, so that we waste less and conserve more. May we, the children of the world, live in harmony with you, your creation, and each other. Amen. V'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz bayom hahu hiye Adonai echad u'shemo echad. We continue now on page 132. There are stars up above, so far away we only see their light long, long after the star itself is gone. And so, too, it is with people that we loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember. This Shabbat, remember those for whom we're in the Shloshim, 30-day period of mourning. Michael Parson, friend of Elise Balzer. Jerry Wolf, friend of Ruth and Peter Adler. Evelyn Kaufman, friend of Ida Jean Fisher. Bill Weiss, Temple member and husband of Brenda Weiss. Vicky Vanzetta, daughter of Joan Paul. We remember as well those whose yard sites occurred this week. Harriet Abrams, Helene Bernstein, Rebecca Blum, Leonard Ehrlich, Helen Fox, Sylvia Greenberg, Barry Gross, Howard Gutman, Shirley Hirschfield, Edith H. Joseph, Joseph Katz, Charles P. Nieder, Charlotte Lehman, Henry Lehman, Elsa Loeb, Donald McNamara, Eugene Nahm, Helen Oppenheimer, David Rager, Leonard Rellis, Gilbert Rose, Samuel Rosenfeld, Mitchell Rosenthal, David Salovitz, Regina Salovitz, Nettie Sandler, Jonathan Mark Sirota, Susan Kagan Sherman, Solomon J. Siegel, Niza B. Veach, Julius Warshaw, Sidney Weber, and Marjorie Weinberg. And we remember the names of the 6 million who perished in the Holocaust. Shulamit Bilder of Poland, age 15, Tzvi Bick of Czechoslovakia, age 10, Tamara Berger of the Soviet Union, age 7, Yekel Birkan of Latvia, age 5, Robert Birnbaum of France, age 13, and Veronika Birnbaum of Czechoslovakia, age 4. We remember them all. We take them into our hearts with our own as we turn now to page 134. Please rise if you are able for the mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divrach rutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei l'chol beit Yisrael, v'agalau b'zman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mivorach le'olam u'olmei almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei d'kudsha b'richu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, ta'amiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, Hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru. Amen. May the source of peace and peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved. And let us say, Amen. Please be seated. It is my pleasure at this time to call upon Stephanie Stokes, a member of our Board of Trustees, to offer Shabbat greetings and announcements. You brought your own copy and everything. How prepared are you? All right.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
On behalf of the Board of Trustees, it's my pleasure to welcome you to our Shabbat morning service. Our guest speaker for this Martin Luther King Jr. weekend was unfortunately unable to be here last night. We hope to welcome him instead next Friday night, January 20th. Minister Kerwin Webb of the Red Bank NAACP and the New Jersey Social Justice Remembrance Coalition will speak on examining Dr. King, his dream, and what it means for us in 2023. Meanwhile, Temple Emeth is pleased to host the 2023 Bergen County Martin Luther King birthday celebration on Monday, January 16th at 6:30 p.m. This year's theme is Democracy Matters, and keynote speaker will be Helen Archonto, sorry if I messed up her name, CEO of the WYCA, North New Jersey. We hope you'll attend this festive community event, person or on live stream. On Sunday, January 22nd, pop culture historian David Levin will discuss Jews and comic books at our next Yachad breakfast. David has produced and directed documentaries on pop culture for MTV, Discovery, A&E, and other networks. Registration is $7 per person and is due by next Sunday, January 15th. That morning's program begins at 9 a.m. Join us on Friday, January 27th at 8 p.m. as Temple Emeth observes Highest Refugees Shabbat, celebrating the Jewish call to welcome strangers. Our guest speaker will be Laura Bloom, a trustee of the Northern New Jersey Sanctuary Coalition, on our organization's mission and actions, and a client of the organization on his journey to the United States. Temple accompanist Tom Mustachio will perform music by refugee composers. This special Shabbat will also be Cantor Tillam's first Shabbat back after her sabbatical. On January 28th, Temple Emeth members are invited to participate in a community-wide Shabbaton hosted by Temple Ner Tamid in Bloomfield. The full-day event starts at 9:30 a.m. and runs through 5 o'clock p.m. with yoga, study sessions, a Shabbat workshop, meals, and a Havdalah. For more information or to register, please see your weekly email or the Temple Emeth website. Finally, the Temple Emeth Purim Committee is already preparing special Shalach Manot packages for Purim this year. Baskets are $5 and can be sent to Temple Emeth families and staff. Information is available in the lobby, on our website, and in the January bulletin, which is available online. Thank you this morning to our volunteers in the live stream control room, Pauline Heck, Patty Dunham, and Miriam Daloff, are at the controls this morning. Shabbat Shalom.
We continue now with the Kiddush. So, let's see, gotta get organized here. Hang on a second. Please rise if you are able for the Kiddush. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen l'chaim. And we join together in the Motzi. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. We've reached the end of our service. That means if you're watching on live stream, it is your last chance to post in the chat or comment section of the live stream platform. And if you're here in the sanctuary, it means it's your opportunity to turn to one another as we end our service by saying Shabbat Shalom.